Get out of my house before I call the police. My son screamed after what he found in my attic. I thought I was protecting my family's future, but what I discovered next made my blood run cold. I'm glad you're here with me. Stay until the end and comment which country you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels. I never imagined that at 70 years old I'd be standing in my kitchen, hands trembling as I poured tea with shaking fingers, wondering if the son I'd raised had become someone I no longer recognized. My name is Beatrice Holloway, though most people call me Bea. I've lived in this sprawling 3-story Victorian house in Ashford Springs, Connecticut, for nearly 47 years. The house sits on Maple Ridge Drive, a quiet street lined with century-old oak trees that turn brilliant shades of gold and crimson every autumn. My late husband, Thomas, and I purchased this home back in 1978, when our son, Marcus, was barely 2 years old. Thomas passed away 8 years ago, after a brief but devastating battle with pancreatic cancer. He left me with this beautiful house filled with memories, a garden he'd lovingly tended for decades, and enough savings and insurance money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. The life insurance payout had been substantial. Thomas had always been careful about such things, and I'd invested it wisely, with the help of a financial advisor Thomas had trusted for years. Marcus is my only child, my pride and joy, or at least he used to be. He's 43 now, tall and handsome like his father, with the same intense brown eyes and strong jawline. He runs a successful financial consulting firm called Holloway and Associates in downtown Hartford, about 30 minutes from my home. For years, he'd been what I considered the model son, attentive, successful, respectful. He called every Sunday evening without fail, visited at least twice a month, never forgot my birthday or our annual Mother's Day brunch tradition. But over the past 6 months, something had shifted. The calls became shorter, more perfunctory. The visits grew less frequent, and when he did come by, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, leaving earlier than usual with vague excuses about meetings or obligations. Then came his separation from Diane. Marcus and Diane had been married for 17 years. I had loved Diane like the daughter I never had. She was warm, genuine, a high school English teacher who volunteered at the local library on weekends. They'd met in college, married young, and seemed genuinely happy together. They'd struggled with infertility for years, which had been heartbreaking for all of us, but they'd seemed to accept their life as a couple, talking about traveling more and perhaps adopting someday. When Marcus called me last April to tell me they were separating, I was devastated. "Mom, Diane and I have grown apart," he'd said, his voice flat and emotionless. "We want different things. It's nobody's fault. We're handling everything amicably." I'd reached out to Diane immediately, offering support, but she'd been strangely evasive. "I can't talk about it, Bea," she'd said, her voice thick with tears. "Just know that Marcus isn't who I thought he was. I'm sorry. I love you, but I can't be part of this family anymore." Those words had haunted me for months. What did she mean? What had Marcus done? Every time I tried to ask him about it, he'd shut down the conversation, telling me it was between him and Diane, that I needed to respect their privacy. Now it was late October, the divorce still not finalized, and I was about to learn exactly what Diane had meant. That Thursday morning started like most of my days. I woke at 6:30, made my bed with the precision of decades of habit, and went downstairs to my kitchen. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains Thomas had helped me hang 20 years ago, casting delicate shadows across the worn wooden floor. I put the kettle on for my usual chamomile tea and was reaching for my favorite mug, a blue ceramic one that said "World's Best Mom" that Marcus had given me when he was 12, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name. My heart lifted slightly. He rarely called during the week and never this early. "Good morning, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice cheerful despite the underlying worry I'd been carrying. "Mom," his voice was tense, clipped, "I need to come by today. This afternoon, around 2:30. Are you available?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "Of course I'm available. Marcus, is everything all right? You sound stressed." "Everything's fine. I just need to discuss something important with you, in person." "About the divorce? Is there news?"
There was a pause. No, not about that. Look, I really can't get into it over the phone. I'll see you at 2:30, okay? And Mom, he hesitated. I'm bringing someone with me. Someone very important to me. My breath caught. A woman? Yes. Her name is Sienna. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and I want you to meet her.
I spent the rest of the morning in a state of anxious preparation. I cleaned the already spotless living room, fluffing cushions that didn't need fluffing, rearranging the antique china figurines on the mantelpiece that Thomas had collected during his business trips to Europe. I baked a batch of Marcus's favorite dessert, my grandmother's recipe for maple walnut cookies, measuring each ingredient with shaking hands. By noon, I'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a comfortable lavender cardigan over a simple cream blouse and gray slacks. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also wanted to make a good impression on this mysterious Sienna who had apparently captured my son's heart. At 2:15, I was standing at the living room window, watching for Marcus's car. The October afternoon was beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue, the trees in my yard showing off their autumn colors. Mrs. Pemberton from next door was raking leaves, and she waved when she saw me in the window. I waved back, automatically, my mind elsewhere. At exactly 2:30, Marcus's black Mercedes sedan pulled into my circular driveway. My heart hammered as I watched him step out of the driver's side. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and his hair was styled with that product he'd started using that made it look slightly wet. He looked successful, polished, but also somehow harder than I remembered. The warm, open-faced boy I'd raised seemed to have been replaced by this sharp-edged man I barely recognized. The passenger door opened, and a woman emerged. She was young. That was my first thought. Very young. Probably in her late 20s, maybe 30 at most. She had the kind of beauty that seemed almost manufactured. Long, platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, porcelain skin, lips that were too full to be natural, and a figure that her tight designer dress showed off to maximum effect. She wore stiletto heels that must have been 4 inches high, making her almost as tall as Marcus when she stepped next to him. But it was her eyes that struck me most. Even from the window, I could see them scanning my house with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. She wasn't looking at it the way someone might admire a beautiful old home. She was studying it, evaluating it, like an appraiser calculating value. I opened the front door before they reached it, forcing a smile onto my face. "Marcus, sweetheart, welcome home." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, but the gesture felt perfunctory, almost obligatory. "Hi, Mom. You look nice." "Thank you, dear." I turned to the woman beside him, extending my hand. "You must be Sienna. It's lovely to meet you." She took my hand, but her grip was limp, barely a handshake at all. "Hello, Beatrice." Not Mrs. Holloway, not, "Hi, it's so nice to meet you too." Just Beatrice, as if we were colleagues at a business meeting rather than a young woman meeting her boyfriend's mother for the first time. "Please come in. I've made tea and cookies." As they followed me inside, I could hear Sienna's heels clicking on the hardwood floors. "What an interesting house," she said, her voice carrying a tone I couldn't quite identify. "How old is it?" "It was built in 1894, I said, leading them into the living room where I'd set out the tea service on the coffee table. "Thomas and I fell in love with it the moment we saw it. It needed a lot of work when we bought it, but we restored it over the years." "And it's just you living here now?" Sienna settled onto my sofa without waiting to be invited, crossing her long legs and looking around with those calculating eyes. "Yes, since Thomas passed, but I manage just fine. I have a wonderful neighbor, Mrs. Pemberton, and my cousin Eleanor lives just 20 minutes away." "It seems like a lot of house for one person," Sienna observed, accepting the cup of tea I offered but not touching it. "How many bedrooms?" The question seemed invasive, but I answered anyway. 5 bedrooms and 3 full bathrooms, plus the attic, which Thomas converted into an art studio years ago. He was an amateur painter in his spare time. 5 bedrooms. Sienna glanced at Marcus with an expression I couldn't read. "That's quite spacious." Marcus cleared his throat, setting down his teacup with more force than necessary. "Mom, we didn't just come here for tea and small talk. Sienna and I have something important to discuss with you." My stomach nodded. "All right, I'm listening." "Sienna and I are engaged," Marcus announced. He said it without preamble, without warmth, almost like he was announcing a business merger rather than sharing happy news.
The words seemed to echo in the room. Engaged. My son was engaged while still married to someone else. I, I don't know what to say. I looked between them, searching Marcus's face for some explanation. The divorce isn't final yet, is it? It will be in a few weeks, Marcus said dismissively. We're just being proactive about planning our future. Congratulations, I managed, though the word felt hollow. This is quite sudden, isn't it? How long have you two been seeing each other? Long enough to know what we want, Sienna interjected smoothly. When you know, right, Marcus? He nodded, but something in his expression seemed trapped, almost helpless. Well, I said, trying to inject some warmth into my voice, despite my growing unease. I wish you both happiness. When are you thinking of getting married? Next summer, Sienna said. We're thinking a destination wedding, something elegant and expensive, St. Lucia, maybe, or the Amalfi Coast. The way she emphasized expensive made my skin prickle. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. Mom, there's more. Sienna and I have been talking about our living situation, and we've come up with a proposal that we think would benefit everyone.
What kind of proposal? We'd like to move in here, Sienna said bluntly, cutting through whatever diplomatic approach Marcus had been planning. This house is far too large for one elderly woman living alone. It's impractical, expensive to maintain, and frankly, it's not safe for you to be here by yourself at your age. The words hit me like a physical blow. Elderly woman. At my age. As if I were decrepit and incompetent, instead of a healthy, active 70-year-old who still did yoga 3 times a week and volunteered at the hospital twice a month. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own home. I'm not ready to give up my independence. Mom, be realistic, Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. You're 70 years old. What if you fall down these stairs? What if you have a medical emergency in the middle of the night? What if I want to continue living in my own home in the house I shared with your father, maintaining the independence I've worked hard to preserve? I interrupted, my own voice rising. Marcus, I understand you're worried, but I'm not helpless. We're not saying you're helpless, Sienna interjected, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We're saying you need family around you. We could take care of you, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything. I don't need taking care of. But you could have help, Marcus pressed. Sienna and I would handle all the maintenance, all the repairs, all the expenses. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. I like lifting fingers. I like taking care of my own home. Sienna's smile became strained. Let's be honest about the financial aspect too, Beatrice. Marcus told me you're living on retirement savings and Social Security. Those roof repairs you mentioned needing last month, that's going to cost at least $20,000. The foundation has cracks that need addressing. The heating system is ancient. Can you really afford all of that on a fixed income? Anger flared in my chest. Marcus had been discussing my finances with this woman? A woman I just met? My financial situation is secure, thank you. Thomas left me well provided for, and I have more than enough to cover maintenance and repairs. Do you, though? Sienna's mask of sympathy was slipping, revealing something harder underneath. Because Marcus showed me the property tax records. This house is worth at least $1.2 million in the current market. The property taxes alone must be a significant burden. Wouldn't it make more sense to have us move in and share expenses? Or better yet, you could consider downsizing to a nice little condo or assisted living facility. Assisted living? I stood up abruptly, my hands shaking with rage. I am 70, not 90. I am healthy, mentally sharp, and perfectly capable of living independently in my own home. Marcus stood too, his face flushing. Mom, Sienna is just trying to help. Why are you being so defensive? Why am I being defensive? You brought your fiancé, a woman I just met, into my home to tell me I should move out and let you take over the house your father and I built our life in? That's not what we're saying, Marcus protested weakly. Then what are you saying?
Sienna stood, smoothing her tight dress with long manicured nails painted blood red. Look, Beatrice, let me put this plainly. Marcus and I are starting our life together. We need space. We're planning to start a family soon, and we need a proper home for that. This house has 5 bedrooms, more than enough space for all of us. We're proposing that we move in, take the master bedroom and the second floor, and you could have the guest room on the first floor. It's right next to the main bathroom, so you wouldn't have to navigate stairs. It would actually be safer for you. The guest room. The smallest room in the house, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, the space Thomas and I used primarily for storage. They wanted to banish me to a storage room in my own home? Absolutely not, I said firmly. This is my house, mine and Thomas's. I will not be relegated to a back bedroom like an inconvenient relative. You're being unreasonable, Marcus snapped. We're offering you a solution that benefits everyone. You get family around you, security, help with expenses. We get the space we need to start our lives together. It's practical. It's insulting, I shot back. And I notice neither of you has asked what I want. You've just decided what's convenient for you. What's convenient for us is also what's safe for you, Sienna said, her voice hardening. Let's not pretend you can maintain this house forever. You're already showing signs of decline. Marcus told me you forgot your cousin's birthday last month, and you've been having trouble with your memory. I did not forget Eleanor's birthday. It's in December, and this is October. I turned to Marcus, feeling betrayed. You told her I'm having memory problems? Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. I just mentioned that you seemed a little confused on the phone once. Once! One time! I mixed up the day of the week because I'd been at the hospital all day volunteering, and now you're using that as evidence that I'm incompetent? Nobody's saying incompetent, Sienna said smoothly. Just that at your age, it's natural to need support. Look, Beatrice, you can either work with us on this or we'll have to pursue other options. Marcus is your only child, your only heir. Eventually, this house will pass to him anyway. We're just suggesting we make practical arrangements now instead of waiting for some unfortunate incident to force the issue.
The threat was barely veiled. My chest tightened with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Was this really my son, standing before me, nodding along while his fiancée threatened me in my own living room? I think you should leave, I said quietly, my voice shaking. Both of you. Mom, Marcus started. No, I want you to leave. Now. Sienna's eyes flashed with anger, but she composed herself quickly. Why don't we take a little tour first? I'd love to see the rest of this beautiful house. Maybe seeing the space will help you understand our vision. I said I want you to leave. But Sienna was already moving toward the stairs, her heels clicking decisively on the hardwood. Come on, Marcus, let's at least see the upstairs before we go. I want to see this famous attic studio. Sienna, maybe we should... Marcus looked between us, torn. It'll just take a minute, Sienna called back, already halfway up the stairs. Marcus gave me an apologetic look that did nothing to ease the fury in my chest, then followed his fiancée up the stairs. I stood frozen in my living room, listening to them move through the second floor, Sienna's voice carrying down as she commented on each room. This would be perfect for a nursery. Lots of natural light. We need to replace the carpeting, of course. Oh, Marcus, look at this bathroom. The fixtures are ancient. We'd have to completely gut and renovate this. It could be gorgeous, though. I'm thinking marble countertops, a freestanding tub. She was mentally redecorating my home, erasing 47 years of memories, as if Thomas and I had never existed, as if our life together was just outdated decor to be discarded. Then I heard them on the attic stairs, the narrow, steep staircase that led to Thomas's studio. My heart began to race. The attic. Oh, God, the attic. I'd been meaning to organize things up there for years, ever since Thomas died. I'd boxed up some things, moved others around, but I hadn't had the heart to really go through everything. It was the last space that was entirely Thomas's, preserved exactly as he'd left it. But there was something else in the attic, something I'd hidden there 6 months ago after Diane had come to see me in tears, after she told me the truth about Marcus's affair, after she'd given me the evidence she'd collected during their separation. Something that would explain everything.
Footsteps thundered on the attic stairs, running, not walking. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then Marcus's voice, loud and furious, echoing through the entire house. "Mom, what is this? What in the hell is in your attic?" He appeared at the top of the main staircase, his face purple with rage, holding something in his hand. Behind him, Sienna looked triumphant, like a cat that had caught a particularly valuable mouse. And in that moment, as my son descended the stairs toward me with fury in his eyes and accusation in his voice, I knew that everything was about to change. The careful peace I'd been maintaining, the hope that somehow we could salvage our relationship despite his divorce and questionable choices, all of it was about to shatter. Because they'd found what I'd hidden. They'd found the truth. Marcus stood at the bottom of the stairs, his face contorted with rage, clutching a large manila envelope in his trembling hand. Behind him, Sienna descended with deliberate slowness, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her perfectly painted lips. "What is this?" he demanded, shaking the envelope at me. "Why do you have this? Why was this hidden in your attic?" My mouth went dry. I'd known this moment would come eventually, but I hadn't expected it like this. Not with Sienna present, not when I was already reeling from their audacious attempt to take over my home. "Marcus, please calm down. Let's sit and talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" His voice cracked with fury. "You want to talk rationally after I find this in your attic? Answer the question, Mom. Why do you have a file full of private investigator reports about me?" Sienna settled onto my sofa like she owned it, crossing her legs and watching the scene unfold with barely concealed glee. She was enjoying this, I realized. She probably had been the one to insist they go up to the attic, sensing there might be something useful up there. "It's not what you think," I began, but Marcus cut me off. "Not what I think. There are photographs in here, Mom. Bank statements, hotel receipts, text message transcripts. This is a complete dossier on my private life." He pulled out a photograph and thrust it toward me. "This was taken at the Riverside Hotel in Boston. Someone was following me. Someone you hired." I looked at the photograph, though I didn't need to. I'd seen it dozens of times over the past 6 months. It showed Marcus and Sienna entering a hotel together, his hand on the small of her back, both of them laughing. The timestamp showed it was taken 14 months ago, a full year before Marcus had told me about his separation from Diane. "I didn't hire anyone," I said quietly. "Diane did." That stopped him cold. "What?" "What did you expect?" I asked, my own anger finally breaking through. "Did you think she wouldn't notice when you started working late every night? When you suddenly needed to take so many business trips? When you started buying expensive gifts that she never received?"
My marriage is none of your business. You made it my business when you brought your mistress into my home and tried to convince me to hand over my house to you. My voice rose despite my attempt to stay calm. You made it my business when you started lying to me, when you told me the separation was mutual and amicable, when you let me believe that you and Diane simply grew apart. Sienna stood up, her expression hardening. "I'm not a mistress. Marcus and I are in love. What he had with Diane was already dead. We didn't break up a happy marriage." "You were sleeping with him for a year before he left his wife," I said, looking directly at her. "That's the definition of a mistress." Her eyes flashed with fury. "You bitter old woman. You're just jealous that Marcus chose someone young and beautiful instead of staying shackled to that boring, frumpy schoolteacher. Don't you dare talk about Diane that way." I stepped toward her, my hands clenched into fists. "Diane was a good woman, a loyal wife, and she loved Marcus with her whole heart. You destroyed their marriage." "I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken," Sienna shot back. "Marcus was miserable with her. She couldn't even give him children. What kind of wife can't perform the most basic biological function?" The cruelty of it took my breath away. Diane's infertility had been a source of deep pain for both of them. To hear it weaponized so casually made me see red. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Get out right now." "We're not going anywhere until we get some answers," Marcus interjected. He was pacing now, running his hand through his hair, the envelope still clutched in his other hand. "How long have you had this file? How long have you been sitting on this information?" "Diane gave it to me 6 months ago, right after you told me about the separation." 6 months? Marcus stopped pacing, and stared at me. "You've known about Sienna for 6 months and you never said anything?" What was I supposed to say? "You're a grown man, Marcus. I can't control your choices." I hoped that maybe you'd come to your senses, that you'd realize what you were throwing away. I kept hoping you'd end this affair and try to save your marriage. "There was no marriage left to save," Marcus said bitterly. "Diane and I were strangers, living in the same house." "That's not what these reports show." I picked up the envelope he'd dropped on the coffee table. I pulled out several documents and spread them on the table. According to the investigator's notes, Diane was planning a surprise vacation for your 15th anniversary. She'd booked a trip to Ireland, the place you'd always talked about visiting together. She was trying to reconnect with you. He looked away, but not before I saw guilt flash across his face. "And here," I continued, pulling out more papers, "these are text messages between you and Diane from 18 months ago. You were already telling her you loved her while Diane was at home planning anniversary celebrations. You were already looking at apartments together while your wife was trying to save your marriage." "You don't understand the situation," Marcus said weakly. "Then explain it to me. Make me understand how the son I raised, the boy who cried when we had to put our dog to sleep because he hated seeing anything suffer, could be so cruel to someone who loved him." Sienna laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Oh, this is rich! The mother who raised such a moral, upstanding son. Tell her, Marcus. Tell her about the business." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What about the business?" Marcus shot Sienna a warning look, but she ignored him. "Go on, baby. Tell Mommy Dearest about why we really need to move into this house. Tell her about the money." "Sienna, shut up," Marcus hissed. But I was already putting pieces together, connections I should have made earlier. "Marcus, is your business in trouble?" "It's fine, just a temporary cash flow issue." "How temporary? How much trouble are you in?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I made some investments that didn't pan out. I took out some business loans to cover expenses, thinking we'd land a major contract that fell through. It's nothing I can't handle." "How much?" I pressed. $200,000, Sienna answered when Marcus remained silent. "He's $200,000 in debt, and the bank is threatening to foreclose on his office building. That's why we need to sell this house, or at least use it as collateral for a loan." The room seemed to spin. "You want to use my house as collateral for your business debts?" "It would just be temporary," Marcus said quickly. "Just until I get back on my feet. This house has so much equity, Mom. We could easily get a loan for $300,000, pay off my debts, and still have money left over for renovations. Then once the business is profitable again, we'd pay it back." "And what happens if you can't pay it back? What happens if the business fails? I lose my home, the house your father and I spent our lives building?" "That won't happen," Marcus insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're damn right it won't happen, because I'm not risking my home for your bad business decisions." I stood up, my whole body shaking. "Is this what this was all about? This sudden concern for my safety? This proposal to move in and take care of me? It was all just a scheme to get access to my house?" "It's not a scheme, Mom. I do worry about you living here alone. But that's not why you came here today, is it? You came here because you're desperate, you're drowning in debt, and you saw my house as a life raft."
Sienna stood up, smoothing her dress. "Look, Beatrice, let's be practical here. You're sitting on over $1 million in real estate equity while your only son is facing financial ruin. What kind of mother would let her child lose everything when she has the means to help? What kind of son would ask his mother to risk her home for his mistakes?" I countered. "I'm not asking you to risk anything," Marcus's voice rose again. "I'm asking for a loan against the equity. It's not the same as risking the house." "Yes, it is. The moment you put a lien on this property, you put it at risk. And given your current financial situation, I'd be insane to trust you with something this important." "So you don't trust me?" Marcus's voice was flat, hurt. "Your own son?" "Right now? No, I don't.
You lied to your wife for over a year. You're lying to yourself about your relationship with Sienna, and I'm starting to think you've been lying to me, too. When was the last time you called me because you actually wanted to talk to me, not because you needed something? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood there looking at me with something like shock, as if it had never occurred to him that I might see through his act. "This is ridiculous," Sienna said, grabbing her purse from the sofa. "We don't need to stand here and be insulted. Marcus, let's go. We'll figure something else out." "What else is there?" Marcus asked, and the desperation in his voice broke my heart. "Mom's house is our only option. The banks won't give me any more credit. I've maxed out every card. If I don't come up with that money in the next 60 days, I lose everything." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent thousands of dollars on jewelry for your girlfriend," I said quietly. I pulled out another set of documents from the envelope. "Credit card statements, Marcus. $15,000 at Tiffany & Co., $20,000 at Cartier, $8,000 on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, all while your business was failing and your wife was working extra hours tutoring to save money for your anniversary trip." He had no response to that. He just stood there, staring at the evidence of his own recklessness. "This is ridiculous," Sienna said, grabbing her purse from the sofa. "We don't need to stand here and be insulted. Marcus, let's go. We'll figure something else out." "What else is there?" Marcus asked, and the desperation in his voice broke my heart. "Mom's house is our only option. The banks won't give me any more credit. I've maxed out every card. If I don't come up with that money in the next 60 days, I lose everything." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent thousands of dollars on jewelry for your girlfriend," I said quietly. I pulled out another set of documents from the envelope. "Credit card statements, Marcus. $15,000 at Tiffany & Co., $20,000 at Cartier, $8,000 on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, all while your business was failing and your wife was working extra hours tutoring to save money for your anniversary trip." He had no response to that. He just stood there, staring at the evidence of his own recklessness. "You need to leave now," I said, exhausted by the whole confrontation, "both of you. And Marcus, until you're ready to have an honest conversation with me about your business, about Diane, about why you really came here today, I don't think we have anything more to say to each other." "You're making a mistake," Sienna said coldly. "When Marcus loses his business, when he loses everything because you were too selfish to help, that will be on you." "No," I said firmly, "his poor decisions are on him. I didn't make him have an affair. I didn't make him take out risky loans. I didn't make him spend money he didn't have trying to impress a woman half his age. Those were his choices, and he needs to face the consequences." Marcus looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part anger, part shame, part something that might have been grudging respect. "I never thought you'd turn on me like this." "I'm not turning on you. I'm refusing to enable you. There's a difference." He shook his head slowly, then turned toward the door. Sienna followed but paused at the threshold. "You'll regret this," she said low and venomous. "You think you're so smart, so righteous, but you're just a lonely old woman in a house too big for you, and one day you'll wake up and realize you pushed away the only family you had left." After they left, I stood in my living room listening to Marcus's car pull out of the driveway. The house felt impossibly quiet, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I walked slowly to the window and watched them drive away. Mrs. Pemberton was still raking leaves in her yard, and she looked up as Marcus's Mercedes sped past, going too fast for a residential street. She caught my eye through the window and waved tentatively, concern on her face. I waved back, trying to smile, but I could feel tears starting to build up behind my eyes. For 43 years, I'd been Marcus's mother. I changed his diapers, stayed up with him through childhood illnesses, helped him with homework, celebrated his achievements, comforted him through disappointments. I put him through college, helped with the down payment on his first house, been there for every major moment of his life. And now, standing in my living room with the evidence of his betrayal scattered across my coffee table, I felt like I didn't know him at all. The son I'd raised would never have cheated on his wife. He would never have manipulated his mother for financial gain. He would never have allowed his girlfriend to speak to me with such disrespect. But that son was gone. In his place was a man I barely recognized, a stranger driven by debt and desperation, and the influence of a woman who saw people as assets to be exploited. I sank onto the sofa, suddenly feeling every one of my 70 years. My hands were still shaking, and I realized I was crying, quiet tears that slid down my cheeks without sound. How had it come to this? When had I lost my son? The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the living room. I should get up, put away the tea service, clean up the cookies that no one had eaten. I should call Eleanor, or maybe even Diane, tell them what had happened. But I couldn't seem to move. I just sat there, surrounded by the evidence of my son's moral collapse, wondering what I was supposed to do next. That's when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway again. My heart leapt with hope. Maybe Marcus had come back. Maybe he'd realized how badly he acted. Maybe we could talk this through like adults.
But when I looked out the window, it wasn't Marcus's Mercedes. It was a silver Lexus I didn't recognize. A woman stepped out, tall, slim, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was wearing a professional pantsuit and carrying a briefcase. She looked up at my house, consulted something on her phone, then walked purposefully toward my front door. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I wiped my eyes, straightened my cardigan, and went to answer it. When I opened the door, the woman smiled at me with practiced politeness. "Mrs. Beatrice Holloway?" "Yes." "My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm a real estate attorney." She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to me. "I'm here on behalf of your son, Marcus Holloway, regarding this property." My stomach dropped. "I don't understand." "May I come in? I think we need to have a conversation about some legal documents your son recently discovered, documents that concern the ownership of this house." I stared at her, confused and frightened. "What documents?" Her smile became sympathetic, almost pitying. "Perhaps we should sit down, Mrs. Holloway. What I have to tell you is rather complicated, and I'm afraid it may come as quite a shock." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. As Vanessa Chen walked into my living room, her eyes scanning the space with the same calculating look Sienna had used earlier, I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. This wasn't over. Whatever Marcus had found in that attic, whatever had sent him running out of here in rage, was only the beginning. "Now then," Vanessa said, settling into the chair across from me and opening her briefcase with professional efficiency, "let's talk about the deed to this house. Specifically, let's talk about why your name isn't the only one on it." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about?" She pulled out a document and laid it on the coffee table, right on top of the private investigator's reports, the credit card statements, all the evidence of Marcus's betrayal. "This is a copy of the property deed, filed with the Ashford Springs County Recorder's Office. According to this document, which was filed in 2015, this house is owned jointly by you and your son, Marcus Holloway. You're listed as joint tenants with rights of survivorship." "That's impossible," I whispered. "Thomas left the house to me. Just to me." "Originally, yes. The house was deeded solely to you upon your husband's death in 2017. But in 2015, you signed a quitclaim deed adding Marcus as a co-owner." She pulled a signature on the document. "Is this your signature, Mrs. Holloway?" I leaned forward to look at the document, my vision blurring with panic and confusion. The signature looked like mine, the same looping B, the same slight slant to the letters. But I had no memory of signing such a document. I don't remember this." "You don't remember signing away half of your house?" Vanessa's tone was neutral, but I could hear the skepticism. "No. I mean, Marcus asked me to sign some papers years ago, something about estate planning or taxes. He said it was just paperwork, that it wouldn't change anything about my ownership. He said it was to make things easier when I passed away." "And you signed without reading them? Without having your own lawyer review them?"
I had. God help me, I had. Because Marcus was my son, and I trusted him completely. He'd brought the papers by one afternoon, casual and cheerful, explaining that his financial advisor had recommended some estate planning documents to minimize tax liability. I'd been in the middle of cooking dinner, distracted, and I'd signed where he pointed without really reading the fine print. I said it was just for estate planning, I said, weakly. Estate planning, yes. But what he didn't tell you is that by adding him as a joint tenant, you gave him equal ownership of this property. He has just as much right to this house as you do. In fact, if you were to pass away, the house would automatically become his, bypassing probate entirely. But I'm still alive, I said, trying to understand the implications. I still live here. He can't just take my house. No, he can't force you out. However, as a co-owner, he has certain rights. For instance, he has the right to sell his portion of the property, he has the right to take out loans using his portion as collateral, and most importantly for the current situation, he has the right to force a partition sale. A partition sale? It's a legal process where one co-owner can petition the court to force the sale of a jointly owned property, with the proceeds divided among the owners. It's typically used when co-owners can't agree on what to do with the property. The room was spinning. You're telling me that Marcus could force me to sell my house? It's not your house anymore, Mrs. Holloway. That's the point. You made it his house, too, when you signed that quitclaim deed. And given his current financial situation, which I understand is quite dire, he may have no choice but to pursue a petition sale to access the equity in this property. This is my home. I've lived here for 47 years. I raised my son here. My husband died here. This is all I have left of our life together. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. I understand this is difficult, and I want to be clear. I'm not here as Marcus's advocate. In fact, I'm here because Marcus hired me to initiate partition proceedings, but after reviewing the circumstances of how that deed was signed, I felt ethically obligated to inform you of your legal position before any papers are filed. Why would you do that?
Because I suspect Marcus may have obtained your signature through misrepresentation. If you signed that deed without understanding what you were signing, without independent legal counsel, and based on false information about what the document would do, there may be grounds to void it. But you'd need to act quickly, and you'd need your own attorney. I looked at this woman, the stranger who had walked into my home with information that could destroy my life, and saw something unexpected in her eyes. Sympathy. Maybe even regret. How long do I have? Marcus plans to file partition proceedings on Monday. That gives you 3 days to get legal representation and file a counterclaim challenging the validity of the quitclaim deed. After Monday, things become much more complicated. 3 days, I repeated numbly. It was Thursday afternoon. I had 3 days to find a lawyer, challenge a legal document I'd signed years ago, and somehow prove that my own son had tricked me into signing away half of my house. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such difficult news, Vanessa said, standing and gathering her papers. For what it's worth, I think what Marcus is doing is morally reprehensible. Using a mother's trust to gain financial advantage, then trying to force her out of her own home when he makes poor business decisions. It's unconscionable. Then why are you working for him? She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. I'm not anymore. Consider this my official withdrawal from representation. I'll be notifying Marcus this evening, which means he'll probably find another attorney by tomorrow, one without my scruples. So please, Mrs. Holloway, get help. Today. Right now. After she left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, unable to move, unable to think clearly. The evidence of Marcus's affair was still spread across my coffee table. The private investigator's reports, the credit card statements, the photographs. And now, underneath it all,
the proof that my son hadn't just betrayed his wife and his business partners and his own integrity. He'd betrayed me, too. Years ago, he'd tricked me into signing away half of my house, and now he was going to use that betrayal to take away the only home I'd ever known. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, too numb to care. Mrs. Holloway, this is Diane. Diane Morrison. I mean, I still am for a few more weeks, but can I come see you? I heard about what happened today. Marcus called me gloating about how you'd finally shown your true colors, refusing to help him when he needed you. But I know that's not the whole story. Please, can we talk? I think there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you months ago. I looked around my living room, at the antique furniture Thomas and I had collected over the years, at the photographs on the mantel showing Marcus at every age, at the life we'd built in this house that was apparently no longer fully mine. Yes, I said quietly. Please come. I think it's time we both stopped protecting him. Diane arrived 40 minutes later, just as the last light of day was fading from the sky. I watched through the window as she parked her modest Honda Civic behind where Marcus's Mercedes had been just hours ago. She sat in the car for a long moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her head bowed as if gathering courage. Finally, she stepped out, and even in the dim light of the street lamps, I could see how much she'd changed in the 6 months since I'd last seen her. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and her face had a hollow, haunted quality that made her look years older than her 40 years. Her dark brown hair, which she'd always worn long and styled with care, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, except for the simple gold watch her mother had given her for college graduation. But it was her eyes that struck me most. When she looked up at my house, at the lit windows of the home where she'd spent countless Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations, her eyes held a profound sadness that made my heart ache. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two women who had loved the same man in different ways, both betrayed by him, both struggling to understand how it had come to this. "B," she said softly, and her voice cracked on my name. I opened my arms and she collapsed into them, sobbing in a way that suggested she'd been holding back tears for months. I held her there on my doorstep, stroking her hair like I used to do when she'd come to me with problems during her marriage, when she needed a mother figure to confide in because her own mother had passed away years before. "Come inside, sweetheart. Come in and sit down." I led her to the living room, quickly gathering up the scattered documents from the coffee table. I didn't want her to see those painful reminders just yet. I settled her on the sofa and went to make fresh tea, giving her a few minutes to compose herself. When I returned with 2 steaming cups of chamomile and a box of tissues, Diane had wiped her face and was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. "I'm sorry," she said as I handed her the tea. "I promised myself I wouldn't fall apart like this." "You have nothing to apologize for. I'm glad you came." She took a sip of tea, then set it down with shaking hands. "Marcus called me about an hour ago. He was furious, ranting about how you'd finally shown your true colors, refusing to help him when he needed you. But I know that's not the whole story. He said you had no right to keep that investigator's file, that I had violated his privacy by having him followed." "His privacy?" I repeated bitterly. "He's worried about his privacy while he was destroying your marriage."
That's Marcus now. Everything is always someone else's fault. When I confronted him with the evidence last year, he blamed me. He said I'd driven him away by being too focused on my teaching career, by not being fun anymore, by not understanding the pressure he was under at work. Diane's voice was flat, emotionless, as if she'd told this story so many times it had lost its power to hurt her. "None of that is true. You were a devoted wife." "I know that now. It took me months of therapy to really believe it, but I know it.
The affair wasn't about anything I did or didn't do. It was about Marcus's choices, his weaknesses, his inability to face his own failures like an adult. She looked at me directly for the first time. Bea, there are things I need to tell you. Things I should have told you months ago when I gave you that file. But I was too ashamed, too scared of what it might do to you. My chest tightened. What things? Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook with a worn cover. After I hired the investigator and got proof of the affair, I started digging into our finances. Marcus had always handled the money. He said it was easier since he was a financial consultant, and I trusted him completely. But once I knew he was lying about the affair, I started wondering what else he might be lying about. She opened the notebook, and I could see pages filled with neat handwriting, numbers, dates, all meticulously documented. Our joint checking account was nearly empty. We should have had about $40,000 in savings, but there was less than $3,000. Marcus had been making transfers to accounts I didn't know existed. I started tracking everything: credit card statements, bank records, his business accounts. What I found... She paused, swallowing hard. Bea, your son is not the man either of us thought he was. The attorney who came here today told me he's $200,000 in debt. Diane laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. $200,000 is just what Sienna knows about. The real number is closer to $450,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. How is that even possible? Bad investments, risky business ventures, gambling, yes, gambling. He developed a serious problem about 3 years ago, and Sienna. God, especially Sienna. Diane flipped through her notebook. He met her 2 years ago at a business conference in Miami. She was working as a consultant for wealthy men, if you understand what I mean. She was an escort? A very expensive one. Marcus spent $30,000 on her in the first 3 months they knew each other. Hotel rooms, jewelry, clothes, trips. He was obsessed. When she told him she wanted to stop working and settle down with someone who could support her, he promised her everything. A house, a lifestyle, security. He promised her things we couldn't afford even when his business was doing well. I felt sick. So she's with him for his money? Money he doesn't actually have? She's with him because he convinced her he had money. He told her about this house, about your investments, about the inheritance he'd eventually receive. He painted a picture of wealth and security that was complete fiction. She met my eyes. Bea, he's been planning to get access to your assets for over a year. The quitclaim deed you signed? That wasn't a sudden decision. He researched it, consulted with lawyers about how to do it legally, and then he manipulated you into signing. But why? Why would he do this to me? I would have helped him if he'd just been honest, if he'd come to me and explained. No, you wouldn't have. Because if he'd been honest, he would have had to admit everything. The affair, the debt, the gambling, the lies. He would have had to face consequences. This way, he could maintain the fiction that he was still the successful, respectable son you were so proud of. I thought about all the times over the past few years when Marcus had seemed stressed or distracted, all the times I'd asked if everything was okay and he'd brushed me off with a smile and a joke. I'd believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too painful to consider. There's more, Diane said quietly. And this is the part I've been dreading telling you. More? What else could there possibly be? She turned to a specific page in her notebook, her finger tracing down a list of transactions. About 6 months before Marcus told you about our separation, he started making regular deposits into a separate bank account. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, but they got bigger over time. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Where was the money coming from? That's what I couldn't figure out at first. It wasn't from his business. Those records were separate, and I could track them. It wasn't from our joint accounts. It was coming from somewhere else, and he'd been very careful to hide the source. She looked up at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. Bea, were you aware that you were paying Marcus a monthly stipend? I blinked in confusion. What? No, I don't give Marcus any regular payments. According to these bank records, there have been monthly transfers from your checking account to Marcus's personal account. They started 3 years ago, small at first, just $500 a month, but over time, they increased. For the past year, you've been transferring $3,000 a month to Marcus. The room tilted. That's impossible. I would know if I was sending that much money every month. That's what I thought too, so I did some digging. Diane pulled out another set of papers. Do you remember setting up online bill pay with your bank? Yes, Marcus helped me set it up about 4 years ago. He said it would be easier than writing checks for all my monthly bills.
Did you ever actually log into the online system yourself after he set it up? I thought back. No. Marcus said he'd show me how, but it seemed complicated, and he offered to just handle paying my regular bills for me. He said it was easier, that I didn't need to worry about it. Diane nodded grimly. When he set up your online banking, he added himself as an authorized user on your account. He could log in as you, see all your transactions, and set up automatic payments, including automatic payments to himself. But the bank statements, I review them every month. I would have seen unauthorized transfers. Did you review them, or did Marcus review them for you? The truth crashed over me like a wave. For the past 4 years, Marcus had been coming by once a month, supposedly to help me organize my bills and financial paperwork. He'd bring over my bank statements, already opened, and we'd go through them together. He'd point out each transaction, the utility bills, the insurance payments, the property taxes, and I'd barely glanced at the actual numbers because I trusted him completely. He's been stealing from me, I whispered. For years, he's been stealing from me. I found evidence of $78,000 transferred from your accounts to his over the past 3 years. But Bea, I think it might be more than that. I think he may have also taken out credit cards in your name, using your excellent credit to get cash advances that he never told you about. My hand went to my throat. I couldn't breathe. Credit cards in my name? I can't prove it yet. I only had access to records related to our joint finances. But there were references in some of his emails to accounts I couldn't trace. References to the backup plan and the secondary funding source. I think he might have been using your identity for years without your knowledge. That's identity theft. That's fraud. I couldn't finish the sentence. My own son, my own child had been systematically stealing from me, lying to me, using my trust and my love to fund his affair and his gambling and his failing business. I know this is devastating, Diane said, reaching over to take my hand. Believe me, I know. When I first figured all this out, I was so angry I could barely see straight. But I was also terrified. Terrified of what Marcus might do if I exposed him. Terrified of what it would do to you if you knew the truth. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was weak. Because part of me still loved him, or at least loved the man I thought he was. Because I didn't want to destroy your relationship with your son. Tears were streaming down her face now. But I should have told you. I should have warned you. Because now he's going after your house, and it's my fault for not speaking up sooner. This isn't your fault, I said firmly, squeezing her hand. None of this is your fault. You were a victim too. When I gave you that investigator's file 6 months ago, I thought that would be enough. I thought if you knew about the affair, you'd be on guard, you'd be careful about any requests he made. But I underestimated him. I didn't think he'd already set the trap with that quitclaim deed. I stood up, suddenly restless with anger and fear. I paced to the window, looking out at the dark street, at the home of Mrs. Pemberton where warm lights glowed in the windows, at the normal, peaceful neighborhood where nothing terrible ever seemed to happen. The attorney said I have 3 days to challenge the deed, 3 days to prove Marcus obtained my signature through fraud. Then we need to move fast. Diane stood too.
her voice taking on a determined edge I recognized from the woman who'd once led the teachers' union in contract negotiations. "We need to get you a lawyer, and we need to gather evidence. I have documentation for the unauthorized transfers. I have emails where Marcus discusses his plans to access your home equity. I have evidence of his gambling debts and his financial relationship with Sienna. All of it can be used to establish a pattern of financial manipulation." "But will it be enough? I did sign that deed. My signature is on the document." "Your signature obtained through misrepresentation. You signed thinking you were doing estate planning paperwork, not giving away half your house. That's fraud, Bea. Clear, actionable fraud." I turned to face her. "Why are you helping me? After everything Marcus put you through, after he destroyed your marriage and your trust, why are you here helping his mother fight him?" She smiled, but her eyes were sad. "Because you were always kind to me. Because you treated me like a daughter when my own mother was gone. Because you deserve better than what your son has become." She paused. "And because I want to see him face consequences for once in his life. He cheated on me, stole from both of us, destroyed our marriage, and he's going to walk away with it all with a young girlfriend and half of your house unless we stop him." "I don't want revenge," I said slowly. "I just want to keep my home." "Then let's make sure you can. But Bea, you need to understand, once we start this fight, once we challenge him legally and expose what he's done, there's no going back. Your relationship with Marcus will be permanently damaged. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the little boy I'd raised, the child who'd crawled into my lap when he was scared, who'd brought me dandelions from the yard and called them flowers. I thought about the young man who'd called me after his first big business deal, so excited he could barely get the words out. I thought about all the memories, all the love, all the years I had devoted to being his mother.
And then I thought about the man who'd stormed out of my house this afternoon, the stranger with cold eyes who'd demanded I risk my home for his mistakes, the son who'd been stealing from me for years while pretending to care for my well-being. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm prepared. Because that little boy I loved, the son I thought I raised, he's already gone. This is just accepting the truth I've been avoiding." Diane nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Okay then. First thing tomorrow morning, we find you the best real estate attorney in Connecticut, someone who specializes in fraud and elder abuse cases." "Elder abuse," I repeated. The words felt strange on my tongue. Is that what this is? Financial exploitation of a senior citizen by a family member? Yes, Bea, that's exactly what this is, and it's a crime. We spent the next 2 hours going through Diane's documentation, organizing everything into a clear timeline of Marcus's financial decline and increasingly desperate behavior. She'd been meticulous in her record-keeping, and I found myself grateful for her teacher's attention to detail. "Look at this," Diane said, pointing to an entry from 18 months ago. "This is when Marcus took out the first major business loan, $150,000. The loan documents show it was supposed to be for office expansion and equipment upgrades. But look at his actual business expenses for that period." I scanned the spreadsheet she'd created. There's no evidence of any expansion or equipment purchases. Because there wasn't any. He took out that loan to pay off gambling debts and to fund his affair with Sienna. The whole business crisis he's facing now, it's not because of bad luck or market conditions. It's because he's been embezzling from his own company for 2 years to support a lifestyle he can't afford. Does his business partner know? Richard? I don't think so. Marcus has been very careful to keep his personal finances separate from the partnership, but Richard is going to find out soon, because when Marcus's creditors come calling, they're going to look at the business assets. Richard Chen is a good man. He doesn't deserve this. No, he doesn't. Just like you don't deserve this, and I didn't deserve this. Diane closed her notebook with a decisive snap. Marcus is like a tornado, destroying everything in his path while convincing himself he's the victim. My phone rang, making both of us jump. I looked at the screen. Marcus's name flashed. "Don't answer it," Diane advised. Anything you say to him right now could be used against you later. Let it go to voicemail. I let it ring. After what felt like an eternity, it stopped. A moment later, a voicemail notification appeared. Against Diane's warning look, I played it on speaker. Mom, it's me. Marcus's voice sounded strained, tired. Look, I know today didn't go well. I know you're upset. But I need you to understand something. I'm drowning here. The business is failing. I've got creditors calling every day. And if I don't come up with serious money in the next 60 days, I'm going to lose everything, including my freedom. Because some of the people I owe money to aren't the kind who accept sorry as payment. There was a pause, and I could hear traffic in the background. He was calling from his car. I know you think Sienna's the problem, but she's not. She's the only thing keeping me sane right now. And maybe I didn't explain the house situation right. I'm not trying to take your home from you. I'm trying to save my life. And I need your help to do it. The partition sale? It's a last resort, Mom. I don't want to do it. But if you won't voluntarily agree to a loan against the equity, I don't have any other options. There was another pause, longer this time. That attorney who came to see you today, Vanessa Chen, she called me and dropped me as a client, said she has ethical concerns about the case, which means you've got maybe 24 hours before I find someone else who doesn't care about ethics, someone who will file those partition papers without asking questions. So please, Mom, please just think about this rationally. It's just money. It's just equity and a house. Is it really worth destroying our relationship over? The voicemail ended. Diane and I sat in silence for a moment. Just money, Diane finally said, her voice dripping with disgust. Your home, your security, your financial stability? It's all just money to him? Your relationship that he's been systematically betraying for years? That's what's really important. He sounded desperate. He is desperate, which makes him dangerous. Diane turned to face me fully. Bea, you need to understand something. The Marcus you're hearing in that voicemail, the one who sounds scared and helpless, that's manipulation. He knows exactly which buttons to push with you. He knows you're a mother who wants to protect your child, even a grown child, even a child who's hurting you. But what if he's really in danger? He mentioned people who aren't the kind who accept apologies. You mean the loan sharks and bookies he borrowed from to fund his gambling habit? Yes, those people are real, and yes, they're dangerous. But that's not your problem to solve. He created this mess through his own choices, and the only way he'll ever change is if he faces real consequences. What if facing consequences means he gets hurt? Diane's expression softened with sympathy. Then that's his burden to bear, not yours. You can't save him from himself, Bea. Trust me, I tried for 17 years. All you'll do is enable him to keep making destructive choices while he drags you down with him. I knew she was right. Logically, I understood everything she was saying, but emotion was not logical, and the maternal instinct to protect my child, even from himself, was overwhelming.
Get some rest tonight, Diane said, gathering her things. Tomorrow morning, I'll pick you up at 8 and we'll go see a lawyer I know. Patricia Blackwood. She's a bulldog in the courtroom and she specializes in cases exactly like this. She helped my friend's mother when her son tried to steal her retirement savings. What happened in that case? The son went to jail for elder abuse and fraud. The mother got her money back and a restraining order. Diane paused at the door. I know that's not the outcome you want to hear, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that saving your home might mean watching Marcus face criminal charges. After Diane left, I wandered through my house, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories. Thomas and I painting the kitchen together, Marcus taking his first steps in the hallway, holiday dinners in the dining room, quiet evenings reading by the fireplace.
This house was more than just property or equity or money. It was the physical embodiment of my entire adult life. And my son wanted to take it from me to pay his debts. I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs heavy with exhaustion and grief. I paused outside what used to be Marcus's childhood bedroom, now converted into a guest room, but still containing some of his old things. His high school baseball trophies, framed photos from his college graduation, a shelf of books he'd loved as a teenager. Who was this person who'd grown from that hopeful boy into a man capable of such betrayal? My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus again. Mom, please pick up when I call. We need to talk about this. I found a new attorney. Papers will be filed Monday morning if we can't reach an agreement. Don't make me do this. Don't make me do this? As if I were the one forcing him to attempt to steal my house. As if I were the one who'd created this crisis through lies and fraud and gambling and affairs. I turned off my phone and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the darkness, listening to the old house settle around me, wondering how many more nights I'd be able to spend here in the home I loved. Somewhere across town, my son was probably lying awake too, plotting his next move, calculating how to extract what he needed from his elderly mother without regard for what it would cost me. And tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable cold. Diane picked me up at 8 o'clock sharp, and we drove to Patricia Blackwood's office in downtown Hartford. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a glass and steel building that spoke of success and power. Exactly what I needed. Patricia Blackwood was nothing like I expected. She was in her mid-50s, with steel gray hair cut short and sharp, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor. Her handshake was firm, her eyes shrewd and assessing. Mrs. Holloway, she said, gesturing to a chair in her corner office overlooking the city. Diane has given me the basics of your situation. Tell me everything, from the beginning. I spent the next hour laying out the entire story. The quitclaim deed, the unauthorized transfers, Marcus's debts, Sienna's involvement, the threatened partition sale. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. You have a strong case for fraud and financial elder abuse. The unauthorized bank transfers alone are prosecutable. The quitclaim deed obtained through misrepresentation can absolutely be voided. But Mrs. Holloway, I need to be frank with you about what this will cost. I have savings. I'm not talking about money, though my retainer is $25,000. I'm talking about what this will cost emotionally. If we proceed, your son will likely face criminal charges. The district attorney takes elder abuse very seriously. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Marcus's voicemail, his desperate voice, the little boy he used to be. Then I thought about the unauthorized transfers, the lies, the systematic betrayal. Yes, I'm prepared. Good. Because Marcus will try to manipulate you every step of the way. He'll apologize, make promises, play on your sympathy. You need to be ready to stand firm. Patricia worked quickly. By noon, she'd filed an emergency motion to void the quitclaim deed and freeze any action on the property. By 2 o'clock, she'd notified the district attorney's office about the unauthorized transfers. By 4 o'clock, Marcus had been served with papers at his office. His response came at 5:30. Not a phone call, but a visit. I was sitting in my living room with Diane when we heard his car in the driveway. We looked at each other and Diane reached for her phone. I'm calling Patricia, she said. No, let him come. I need to face him. Marcus didn't knock. He used his key, a key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. He walked into my house like he still belonged there, but he looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, what have you done? His voice cracked. Criminal charges? You're having me investigated for elder abuse? You stole from me, Marcus, for years. You tricked me into signing away half my house. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be my mother. He was shouting now, tears streaming down his face. "I expected you to help me, not destroy me. Do you have any idea what this will do to my business, to my reputation?"
What about what you've done to mine? I stood up, my own anger rising. You made me a victim, Marcus. You made me the elderly woman too stupid to notice her own son was robbing her blind. That's what you did to my reputation. Sienna appeared in the doorway behind him. Of course she'd come. She looked furious, her perfect face twisted with rage. "You vindictive old bitch," she spat. "You're going to ruin everything because you're too selfish to help your own son." "Get out of my house," I said coldly. "Both of you. Now." "This is half Marcus's house," Sienna shot back. "He has every right to be here." "Actually," Diane said, speaking for the first time, "as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, he doesn't. Patricia did a temporary restraining order preventing Marcus from entering this property or contacting Beatrice except through legal counsel. You're both trespassing." Marcus stared at us in disbelief. "A restraining order? Against your own son?" "Against a man who's been systematically defrauding me. That's who you are now, Marcus, not my son. A criminal." Something broke in his expression. The anger drained away, replaced with pure desperation. He sank onto my sofa, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I got in over my head and I didn't know how to get out. And then it just kept getting worse." For a moment, I saw the little boy again, the child who'd come to me after breaking a neighbor's window, terrified of the consequences. That child had learned that tears and apologies could fix anything, that some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly. "Sorry that the son I raised is gone. Sorry that I have to do this. But I won't let you take my home, Marcus. I won't enable your self-destruction anymore." "Then I'll lose everything," he said flatly. "The business, the house I'm renting, everything, the people I owe money to. Mom, they'll kill me." "Then you need to go to the police, file for bankruptcy, face the consequences of your choices like an adult." Sienna grabbed Marcus's arm. "Come on, she's not going to help. Let's go." As they stood to leave, Marcus looked at me one last time. "I'll never forgive you for this." "I know. I'm learning to live with that." After they left, I collapsed back onto my chair, shaking. Diane put her arms around me as I finally let myself cry. Not gentle tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal and broken inside me. "You did the right thing," Diane whispered. "You did the right thing." The legal battle that followed was brutal. Marcus hired an aggressive attorney who tried every angle, claiming I was senile, that Diane had manipulated me, that I was acting out of spite over his divorce. Patricia demolished each argument with the mountain of evidence we'd compiled. The unauthorized bank transfers were indisputable. The quitclaim deed obtained through fraud was voided within 2 weeks. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation into elder abuse and identity theft. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Richard Shen, Marcus's business partner, contacted Patricia after learning about the investigation. He'd discovered that Marcus had been embezzling from their partnership for over a year, stealing client funds to cover his gambling debts. Richard was filing his own charges, and he had documentation that corroborated everything we'd found. 6 weeks after that terrible Thursday afternoon, Marcus was arrested. The charges were extensive: elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, money laundering. He faced up to 15 years in prison. Sienna disappeared within days of the arrest. The engagement was off, and she'd moved on to another wealthy target, this time being more careful to verify the money was actually there. The house was fully restored to my name. Patricia helped me put additional legal protections in place to prevent anyone from ever manipulating my finances again. I changed all my passwords, closed accounts Marcus had access to, and set up monitoring systems to alert me to any unusual activity. Diane and I became close friends during the ordeal, united by our shared experience of loving and losing the same man. She helped me clear out Marcus's childhood bedroom,
pack away the memories I couldn't bear to look at anymore. And we talked about starting a support group for victims of financial abuse by family members. There were more of us than I ever imagined. Marcus pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 3 years suspended pending full restitution. He'd be out in 2 years if he stayed out of trouble. But his career was over, his reputation destroyed. Everything he'd worked for, everything he valued was gone, destroyed by his own choices. I visited him once in prison, 3 months after his sentencing. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. We sat across from each other in the visitation room, separated by scratched plexiglass, and talked through phones that smelled of disinfectant. "I'm getting help," he said. His voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful. "Therapy, addiction counseling for the gambling. I'm working through a lot of things I should have dealt with years ago." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I know I destroyed our relationship, destroyed everything. But I want you to know I understand now. What you did, pressing charges, refusing to enable me, it was the most loving thing you could have done, even though it didn't feel like love at the time." Tears blurred my vision. "You were my whole world, Marcus. Being your mother was my greatest joy and my greatest accomplishment. Watching you become who you became, it nearly destroyed me."
I destroyed myself. You just refused to help me do it. He pressed his hand against the plexiglass. "I'm going to use this time to become someone you could be proud of again. Not the son you had, but someone better. Someone honest." "I hope you do," I said softly. "I really hope you do." As I drove home from the prison that day, through the beautiful Connecticut countryside, where the leaves were turning brilliant colors again, I thought about how much had changed in 6 months. I'd lost my son, but I'd saved myself. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I had, and I'd learned that sometimes love meant letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when it broke your heart. My house stood solid and beautiful on Maple Ridge Drive, its windows glowing with warm light as I pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Pemberton waved from her yard and I waved back. Eleanor's car was parked in front. She was coming for dinner, bringing her famous lasagna and stories about her grandchildren. Inside, the house no longer felt haunted by betrayal. It felt like home again, my home, protected, secure, filled with memories both bitter and sweet. I made tea in my kitchen, the same blue mug Marcus had given me decades ago. I couldn't throw it away, couldn't erase all the good years just because of the bad ones that followed. The little boy who'd given me that mug had existed, had been real, even if he'd grown into someone I couldn't recognize. That night, as I sat by the fireplace with Eleanor, eating lasagna and watching old movies, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The peace of knowing I'd done the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing I ever done. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Thinking of you. Coffee tomorrow?" I smiled and texted back. Yes, my treat. Life would go on. The house would stand. And someday, maybe, my son would become the man he should have been all along. But whether he did or not, I would be okay. I had survived the betrayal, survived the battle, and reclaimed my life. I was 70 years old, and I was finally truly free. 2 years later, Marcus was released from prison. He'd completed his sentence with good behavior, finished multiple therapy programs, and found work as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. Humable work that paid a fraction of what he'd earned before, but honest work. He sent me a letter asking if we could meet. No pressure, no expectations, just a request to talk. I said yes. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my house and his tiny apartment. He looked different, older, quieter, the desperate edge gone from his eyes. He'd gained some weight back and his hair was graying at the temples. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as we sat down with our coffee. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted.
We talked for 2 hours, really talked, maybe for the first time in years. He told me about his journey in prison, the hard work of facing what he'd become, and why. He told me about the gambling addiction he'd hidden for years, the way Sienna had exploited his weaknesses and fantasies, the cascade of bad decisions that had led to his destruction. "I can never make up for what I did to you," he said finally, "or to Diane, to Richard, or anyone else I hurt. But I'm working on making amends where I can. I'm paying back the money. It'll take me decades, but I'm doing it." "That's good, Marcus. I'm proud of you for trying." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your pride. Maybe someday I will." We didn't have a fairy tale reconciliation. I didn't invite him back into my home or my life in the way we'd once been. But we started rebuilding something, not the mother-son relationship we'd had, but something new. Something based on honesty instead of manipulation, on reality instead of fantasy. He came for Thanksgiving dinner that year. Just him, Eleanor, Diane, who'd become like family, and me. It was awkward at first, but as we shared food and conversation, something shifted. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting what had happened and choosing to move forward anyway. My house still stands on Maple Ridge Drive, my name alone on the deed, my finances protected by systems that ensure what happened can never happen again. I'm 72 years old now, still healthy, still independent, still living the life Thomas and I built together. And sometimes on Sunday evenings, my son calls. We talk about his week, about the small triumphs and challenges of his new life. The conversations are brief, careful, but they're real. It's not the relationship I once had with the little boy who brought me dandelions, but it's the relationship I have with the man he's working to become. And for now, that's enough. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between protecting yourself and helping someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know what country you're watching from. And if this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable destruction, even when it breaks our hearts. Thank you for being here until the end. Your support means everything.